And Pitt gets on the winning track yet again. Pitt now with a 41-17 victory today over Florida State. So Pitt back on the winning side of things this year, snapping their losing streak and doing it in convincing fashion with Kenny Pickett and their quarterback back and playing very, very well against the Florida State team, regardless of what you think of the Noles this year. Here on the Pitt Postgame Show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm your host, Mike Asti, as usual, and joined by Mike Vukovcan of Pittsburgh Sports Now. So, Mike, this game, I guess, doesn't take tons of analysis within the game. I mean, Pitt won this game convincingly. It's a Florida State team that's going through their bumpy ride as well. Pitt had to get off this losing streak at some point, and this was certainly a winnable game coming in. They get the win. Kenny Pickett is back. So first of all, what are your takeaways? And then also, what was different about this Pitt team and this Pitt offense with Kenny Pickett on the field? Because even though his stats did not jump out at you, there's just such a difference of having him versus not having him.
Yeah, Mike, there's a lot of things to get into, but the main thing, as you mentioned, Kenny Pickett was back, and that was different. If he doesn't play, there's Joey Yellen or whoever they went with how bad.
It's not a blowout.
People have told me Florida State was bad.
Right.
I didn't think they were this bad. I have no idea how the hell they beat North Carolina. But
right. They ruined kind of the conference with a bizarre.
That's a head scratcher there. But Pickett made the difference. It would have been a lot closer without him. But the confidence he brings to the offense and the way he's able to get the ball, he was able to get the ball downfield. But the other factor in it was this was what we expected out of the Pitt defense. Their trio quarterbacks that played had no shot back there, aside from the second drive where Brandon Hill took the wrong angle and their quarterback was able to go for 80 yards.
Right.
Their offense didn't do anything against Pitt. Every time he dropped back to pass, he was pressured unless he was dropping the pass off. They were able to create turnovers, and they were just dominant. And that's as well as a performance as I've seen from Pitt's defensive line, and credit to their offensive line, because I've been as critical of their offensive line as anybody. And they had a good game today. In my report card, when I come out on Monday or Tuesday on Pittsburgh Sports Now, for the first time in a while, they're going to get something more than a C. C. So I thought the line performance today by both teams, or by both sides of the ball for Pitt was exceptional.
Yeah, and I think that's also the thing about this game, and you have to take it with a grain of salt, because even though Florida State has that win over North Carolina, as you mentioned, this is a Florida State team that's just, quite frankly, not good. And I think most people who are Florida State fans, one of my best friends actually an FSU alum, not expecting too much out of this Florida State team this year, more surprised by that earlier win than anything. But still, this Pitt team finally played to potential, certainly on the defensive side of the ball, creating those turnovers, even getting points off turnovers. It seemed to be a perfect storm of perfect football defensively, really, for the defense in terms of how they wanted to play this whole year, and were a little bit more in the beginning of the season than in that 4-game losing streak. Does anything about this game give you reason to believe the last 4 weeks were more of, I mean, obviously 4 weeks is hard to say this about, but more of an aberration? Like, what is the real Pitt team, I guess? It's just hard to gauge this team off of how they started, what happened the last 4 weeks. We were talking a week or so ago before the bye on how Narduzzi was on a red hot seat, might not even last the year, the embarrassment of the program. It was talked like that last week, but not as much as maybe we thought there would be. And then getting into this with a big win here, despite it being FSU, that conversation is certainly not going to go on right now, but the overall landscape of the season is still a little bit disappointing. So it's hard to kind of grade this overall season.
This is one game, as all the coaches like to say, and it's never more true than with Pitt. This is one game. They play at Georgia Tech next week. Then they have two Who knows about Virginia Tech now, because they lost to Liberty today, and then they have Clemson.
Yeah.
I think Pitt needs to somehow find a way to get to the 6-win total this season. If they still finish with 5 wins, regardless of anything that happens, unless they run the table here and beat Clemson,
right.
This is going to be regardless of what happened today, it's going to be a disappointing season unless they run the table here. There's still some things I think they could salvage the season. I think Narduzzi's job, if it was in jeopardy, I think he could salvage that. But I still think things need to play out with the assistants. I'm not sure that this game today is going to wipe away that everything's happened before then, because then they play legitimate competition against decent teams in NC State,
right,
Boston College, Notre Dame, and Miami, and they failed. So beating a bad team today doesn't erase what happened, but you have to credit them for winning, for overcoming all the negativity, overcoming Paris Ford opting out of the season.
Right.
So credit the coaches for keeping these the kids' heads in the game. I've been, as I said, I'm going to remain. I'm not going to change my opinion based on one game, but I will credit them for that, and I'll credit them for some of the things they did today. I thought one of the something they've done, first time they've done this year, is they took advantage of all the depth they have on the defensive line, and specifically at defensive end, and they moved Patrick Jones inside almost to a middle linebacker, and that way, and they put him in there on third down pass rushing situations. And Florida State they could have put 2 guys on him. They couldn't block Patrick Jones. So I credit them for some changes they made, but record still remains the same, and work still needs to be done.
And I think you kind of hit it there, and that's coach speak, but that's really true with this Pitt team, especially because even if they finish this season on a high note and kind of seemingly turn things around, it's going to be in the back of the mind of Pitt fans that you didn't just ruin the year in the middle of the season off of quality opponents. Those were beatable teams. If you can do this to Florida State, you should have had a better day with those teams. It's similar talent on the field and ruining the early start. But to Pitt's credit, a lot went on in the last couple of weeks. They ended that last game the worst way you could, getting embarrassed in that losing streak, Narduzzi's job being in question, and then Paris Ford, as you mentioned. You broke that story on Pittsburgh Sports Now, actually, and got some national attention for that. So that's kudos to Pittsburgh Sports Now. But that could certainly have the team unravel again, because we were talking even in terms of Kenny Pickett that why should anybody play for the rest of this year for this Pitt team? Maybe Kenny Pickett needs to take care of his body. He's been hurt. He's been banged up. If he has any hope of playing beyond Pitt, just take care of yourself. Maybe it's the main thing. And yet they galvanized together and they did play well. Does any part of how they played in this game in terms of utilizing weapons and just getting more involved, Kenny Pickett more managing the game, but 21 out of 27, so a great completion percentage, give you reason to believe that Whipple and company used the bye week, that granted, it's still one game to a bad team, but maybe they did work and actually improved on the field? Schematically, did you see anything that if they can manage to do this next week, that maybe it'll convince you that it sucks what happened those 4 weeks, but maybe they've actually done a better job coaching and turned things around schematically?
Well, I think Georgia Tech is a similar opponent next week,
right,
Saturday night. I think they're a somewhat similar opponent. They have a mobile quarterback, so I think we could see a lot of what we saw today. I think they have a few more weapons than Florida State has right now, but I don't know. I think we'll find out against Virginia Tech whether or not some of these things are working, because I just don't know how good Georgia Tech is. I like the fact that I saw a few. I
mean, Addison got much more involved.
Yeah, and it was downfield too. I know they still like to use him underneath, but they at least tempted a couple passes down the field. Jared Wayne caught a 49-yard pass. And one thing they added, it worked 2 out of the 3 times. was the bringing in Nick Patty at the goal line in the Wildcat.
Right.
They've had problems, as we all know, in the red zone running, converting third and shorts or second, whatever the distance is, short yardage. And they tried something different. Instead of trying to run a Vincent Davis, who's a light back and he's not going to gain that yardage. They put a quarterback in there. They spread it wide. Less guys are on the line of scrimmage. And Nick Patty converted the first 2 times for a touchdown. Third time, I know I already saw some tweets. People can't give Mark Whipple a day off of ripping him for.
That's what I mean. Is it?
For trying
better about him at least.
Trying to run Nick Patty 3 straight times on the same play, which I thought was a little crazy. But
2 touchdowns.
This is one game. I don't know. They look good. I don't know. Florida State's offensive line looked awful. So I don't know if they're going to be able to get this sort of pressure next week. But 2 things that were encouraging, if I'm Pat Narduzzi, definitely is the fact that 2 younger guys that were thrown into the starting lineup today because of the suspension before the game of Jason Pinnock, starting quarterback, didn't make the trip to Florida. A.J. Wood stepped in for him at cornerback, and I believe that was the play of the game in the second quarter when he intercepted that ball. Pitt was trailing 14, I believe it was 14-3 at the time. And he intercepted that ball, followed by Jordan Addison 33-yard touchdown or a pass, and then and then they scored after that. That seemed to give Pitt the momentum right there. I thought that was big, and it was good to see a young redshirt freshman stepping in and making a play. And then to close out the scoring, Brandon Hill, who's going to be the replacement for Paris Ford for the next couple of years. He's going to be Pitt's starting safety. He intercepted the ball from Chubba Purdy and returned it 40-some yards for the touchdown. So it's good to see 2 younger guys that are going to be asked to have a prominent role in the future step in on their first game, first start, and make plays.
Yeah, and this Pitt team now at 500, stopping the bleeding of the 4-game losing streak here, but getting a big win over Florida State, regardless, again, what you think of Florida State this year, 41-17 for the Pitt Panthers. It doesn't really get much better than that for this one particular game. I'm Mike Asti. He's Mike Vukovcan of Pittsburgh Sports Now, and this, of course, the Pitt Postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Bottom of the video while we're talking, feel free click on the subscribe button. And anybody there in the chat, feel free to jump along as well. We got a lot of chat activity when Pitt loses, I will say, but not as much when they win. It's almost like the losing's better for business over here. But I'll digress.
Hey, Mike, one thing I wanted to bring up, I didn't mention him. I gave credit to the defensive line and the defensive ends and all that. And I credit him, but I also credit the Pitt staff, because a lot of times, this, when they see Pitt getting a 2-star recruit, fans right away, they have no interest in him and think, he's a bum. But the best player on the football field, I thought, in the first half was Servassier Dennis, Pitt's linebacker. First half, he had 6 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for losses. 2 years ago, he was the last player in Pitt's recruiting class. They got him a day before signing day, or a couple days before signing day. And he was a 2-star recruit, didn't have any other Power 5 offers. Pitt liked what they saw in that kid. He's from New Jersey, and he looks like a star. I aside from Patrick Jones this season, I think he's been Pitt's most consistent, most impactful, most dominating player this season. And he got an opportunity because Cam Bright got hurt earlier in the year. He stepped in, and Dennis he's going to have, I would be shocked if he's not the ACC Defensive Player of the Week this week, but he's a guy that can sniff he stuffs the run, and his ability to get after the quarterback from that linebacker position is his first step is crazy good. And hats off to him, and hats off to, Narduzzi, and I forget at the time who recruited him, but that's a heck of a get for Pitt. And this kid's only he's a redshirt freshman. So he's going to be around for a few years, and he's a guy that he's going to be one of the better linebackers Pitt's had in a long time.
And that speaks to coaching. I mean, obviously you want to get the recruits, and recruiting is a major part of college football, certainly at programs like Pitt. But if you can turn a 2-star into a impact player on your team, I mean, that is coaching. So that is Pat Narduzzi and company coaching them up. And again, maybe that extra week of practice is able to help the team, able to help the staff, able to get rid of the noise, able to help a team regroup after losing someone like Paris Ford, and able to help a 2-star recruit like that get more involved in the team. I mean, eventually the bleeding was going to stop, but it seemed like that bye week did come at the best possible time for Pitt to almost forget the past and try to move on. I will say, moving on the rest of the schedule, though, for the Pitt Panthers, it is kind of unfortunate because the way we're talking here, and kind of as you mentioned, Georgia Tech being very similar to Florida State in terms of a team that you don't really know what to make of, basically an average team at best. Virginia Tech thinking they're a little bit better, having been ranked earlier in the season, but then doing what Virginia Tech's done basically the last 10 years, where they get hyped early and then just parted away and losing to Liberty. And then Clemson, that with or without Trevor Lawrence, that's a team you're going to figure is going to boat race a Pitt. And we'll get to their game tonight here in a moment. So it's hard to kind of gauge this the rest of the way. If Pitt would go out there and blow Georgia Tech out, would beat Virginia Tech and say a close game, and then get both raced to Clemson, I don't know what to really make, I guess, of things, because you're still not sure, because there's no equal opponent to Pitt the rest of the way, or at least to where they were.
It'll be disappointing. They just had too much talent here. I don't want to, be negative. I think sometimes I got a lot of reaction to what I've, my opinions the last couple of weeks. And I think, I think people think that because we cover Pitt, that this might be the way on the other side of the state, but this is not how I operate. Right. I speak what I see. I don't, I'm not sitting in a Pitt jersey and, go Pitt. Do I want them to win? Yeah, of course. It's good. It's good for business. It's good for everything. Right. However, if they're not playing well, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. And I think, think that I was enjoying that. It's not. And I'm going to be honest on what I see here. And this win today was good. There's no way you can.
Absolutely.
A win's a win, and it's a fourth win of the season.
And a convincing win. They didn't just win it. Yeah. They won handily, which is what you wanted to see. Right.
And that's the other thing, too, is we say that Florida State is bad, which they are. However, if you go by the amount of if you look at a roster,
right.
I'm going to do this week, actually, just to put.
Yeah, well, they're 2-5 now, so yeah.
Yeah, if you go up and down their roster, they probably doubled or maybe tripled the amount of 4 and 5-star kids that Pitt has. Well, so while the record isn't good, there's a reason why they're not. It's not because they don't have talent on the team, because coming into college, these kids were all top of the line. Florida State doesn't have any two-star kids, probably not very many 3-star kids.
Sure.
So whatever their problems, and that's one thing I mentioned a couple things written down here. AJ Woods' interception I thought was key, but the other was Mike Norvell, their head coach. I thought he made some just god-awful decisions in the first half to give Pitt an opportunity. His confidence in going for it on 4th down when you're in your own territory against a Pitt defense that they're good. However they're playing the last couple of weeks, that they're good. And I thought that completely sunk his team when they failed a couple of times on 4th down in the first half. And right after that, Pitt marched down the field and scored 14 points off of some really, really, I thought, questionable decisions by Mike Norvell in that first half. And I think those were 2 big things in the first half. But Florida State has talent, but for whatever reason, they're not there yet. So,
yeah, and I will say too, it's interesting for Florida State fans, because they're probably confused with all the talent, how they're not better. But many Florida State fans were kind of okay with Jimbo Fisher being done with that era. I'm sure that they wish they had him back now. They've not been able to put together a decent head coach since his exit there with Florida State, and the talent's still there, but it's just not happening on wins and losses. And they do have a common opponent in terms of what Pitt has coming up. Georgia Tech being the next opponent for Pitt. They did open the season with a victory over Florida State in a very close game, though, 16-13, which was back in the early portion of the year, but still a commonality here moving forward. And yeah, I think, I actually heard some of those criticisms too. I will say, I think that's one thing that we kind of do as a collective. I feel like with the entire Now family, I really do feel like even Corey over there at Nittany Sports Now, from talking to him, I feel like we are trying to be fair and just comment on what we're seeing regardless of anyone's affiliations or anything. I really feel like for the most part, everybody does that. I will say, because I know I heard some criticism too, I didn't enjoy Pitt losing despite being an alum of another school. I tell it like it is. I'm just as hard on West Virginia. I'm sure you've heard me say negative things there if they're playing poorly and tweet in that direction. Listen to those shows. I'm just being honest on the situation here. I don't have a dog in the race necessarily as well. So I'm sure that too about me, that, yeah, it's just being honest about the evaluation of what's in front. If Pitt's boat racing every team, I'm going to say it.
Since you're
sure.
I thought West Virginia got hosed today. I don't know what I thought the last play was I thought the one touchdown that they called back, I thought he did I thought he was out, but I thought those refs today did no favors to any complaints that Neil Braun and his staff have. I think a lot of times coaches lose and they might point to the ref. I thought today West Virginia got no help from those referees.
Well, they definitely didn't get help. I will say we didn't harp on it as being the reason for the loss because they didn't get the running game moving. I mean, it will talk about a defense playing well, though. The West Virginia defense played way above themselves this whole season. After everything that went on in the offseason, they've been great. And they played really well today. It's unfortunate to lose that way. I think that was a bad call, the PI. I actually thought that the catch in the end zone wasn't a TD and he didn't fully have control. Yeah. And then they didn't end up with the touchdown there, kicked a field goal. So I don't know. I will tell you, Neil Brown, and we have it over there at WV Sports Now, Neil Brown didn't take the bait. He basically, at least today and what he said, that he didn't want to use that as an excuse. He gave kind of the coach comment. So we'll see what he says next week. We'll see what he says on Tuesday. But I do feel like we're obviously covering, competing and rival teams here throughout the Now family of networks now with regional coverage beyond just Pittsburgh locally. I do feel like we're mostly fair here, and it's just kind of what we see in front of us. There's nothing we can't make something happen that's not there or turn lipstick on a pig. I'm sure we'd all call each other out if we're doing that. So yeah, again, West Virginia, WV Sports Now, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Nittany Sports Now. There's tons of coverage all over the place. So if you're a fan of any of those schools and don't like the other, there's still something for you throughout our network. Mike, I do want to get your thoughts here, though, before we wrap things up. Again, Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti here, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Pitt's win over Florida State continues their season and gets them off the snide of their losing streak and getting back to 500 record-wise as they look to finish things up. I do want to ask you, though, the impact of this game tonight between Clemson and Notre Dame. Because Clemson's without Trevor Lawrence. Clemson's the defending champs. They're both racing teams. They barely get a win last week without Trevor, but they do end up getting the victory, so they get over that. You figure, obviously, if they win, they're getting in the playoffs. Same thing with Notre Dame. If they win, they're getting in the playoff. But number one, can Notre Dame handle a loss and for you still be a playoff team if that's their only loss of the year without Trevor Lawrence? And is Clemson going to be basically provided a mulligan, whereas if they would lose to this top 15 Notre Dame team without their Heisman quarterback, people would still say, you would agree with, and the committee would still say, well, they didn't have the Heisman winner, so if they go through the season with one loss to Notre Dame, we're going to still put them in because Trevor didn't play.
Well, Clemson better get their act together because they're down 10-0 in the first quarter.
And Trevor's not there, yes, and they could definitely lose.
I do think that because of history, I think Notre Dame has to win in order to make it to the playoffs.
Even if they win out and have that being the only loss?
Yes, just because Ohio State will be there. They play nobody the rest of the season. So that'll be one team. And I believe the SEC, as history shows, for the most part, always gets two teams in.
Yeah, I mean, and Alabama's not lost yet. Yeah,
there's three teams. There's three teams right there. Right, Florida looked really good today. Alabama. I think even if when those two teams play, whoever loses, I still think they have a chance to get in because of the strength of the top half of the SEC. But I think Clemson, if they lose today, I don't think they will drop very far in the rankings, and I think they will get a mulligan just because of the Clemson brand. Whether it's fair or not, I don't know.
Right. Sure.
But I think the Clemson brand and the Trevor Lawrence name and his impact. He's probably the Heisman Trophy favorite. And if he doesn't play, that's obviously going to affect them. So
yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's the case.
You could judge this game fairly without having Trevor Lawrence in there. So I think regardless, unless they get completely manhandled today, I'm talking 45-0, 45-3, then maybe some people will doubt Clemson. But I think if they keep it close, even if they lose or somewhat close, and they win the rest of the season, they're going to be in.
I think Clemson can definitely handle a loss much better than Notre Dame just because they don't have Trevor Lawrence. They have the built-in excuse. The defending champs, which the committee loves that. They want them to defend the crown as long as they have a reasonable record. And they're Clemson with tons of talent. They could still win, though, and it wouldn't shock me with all the talent that's there, even without Trevor Lawrence. Personally, for me, though, I do feel like Notre Dame would have an argument even losing this without Trevor Lawrence, because you mentioned Florida. They do have a loss already. It's not the greatest of losses. The SEC normally gets two teams, but besides Bama, they don't have the normal giants. LSU's taken a year off. Auburn's lost. Georgia has lost a game already. So if you're going to do the old thing that we did back in the day where you're comparing the worst loss and whose loss is worse, Notre Dame losing to Clemson, even without Trevor Lawrence, is probably a better loss than a lot of those schools. But if Miami's overrated, as some think,
I will say this: that's two losses.
Yeah. You still with me, Mike? Your connection faded.
Out there, Mike.
Yeah, you still got me.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I can see.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, we lost connection there for a second. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if you're looking at losses, everyone's lost the game. Go ahead.
Yeah, Georgia's eliminated today. They've lost today's loss to Florida. That's two losses, so they're out. But I tell you what, I think the commission or the committee would love to see Notre Dame win today.
Oh, sure. And get two ACC teams with Notre Dame and Clemson.
And to get Notre Dame in. That's what they want. For, the ACC, they're not really, they're an ACC school this year, but they would probably do anything to have, to be able to put Notre Dame into the college football playoffs. There's no bigger school in the country than them. You get a chance to put them in a playoffs, possibly with Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. That would be a ratings killer.
I do think that
in a good way.
I think if Notre Dame wins, this is boring maybe because we always love debate at the end of a college football season. But unless something crazy happens, if Notre Dame wins this game, the playoff is probably going to be Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Bama. I mean, that's probably the four. That's probably it. We're probably almost done now, unless someone really gets upset the rest of the way or doesn't win a conference title that's right there for them. I also think Notre Dame is getting hurt by the fact that their schedule's normal. This is weird. They're in the ACC this year. Their schedule's arguably normally tougher than it's been this year because Miami, while they're a top 15 team, some believe they're overrated. And North Carolina, who they have coming up, is now no longer ranked because they puttered their season away a little bit when they were top 15 before. So it kind of changes what their record normally is. I mean, normally they have out-of-conference games that normally will make up for whatever happens in the conference. They don't have that this year.
That's a great point, Mike.
So they actually have everyone wanting them in the conference all the time. You could argue they've actually been hurt strength of schedule-wise by being put in the conference this year by what else has gone on.
Though they get hurt in a way, however,
they wouldn't win as many games.
They're going to benefit of the fact that if you look at these opponents, their wins, Duke stinks, South Florida stinks, Wake Forest is below average, we said that thereabouts. Louisville, not that good.
There's no way they're losing again.
Yeah, Pitt, Georgia Tech's not good. Boston College, that could be an interesting game just because of the Djokovic but they don't have enough to hand. North Carolina might be the only game just because of.
It'd be a bad loss now, though.
Yeah, but just because of the amount of points that North Carolina could put on the board with Howe and their offense, they can put up 30 points, 30, 40 points like that. It's whether or not they'd be able to stop Notre Dame. I don't know what their line play is. That's the only game the rest of the year that after today that Notre Dame will have a chance to lose. If not, they're running the table. And then you have two teams are set, Notre Dame and Ohio State. It could be interesting, though, because chances are Clemson and Notre Dame are going to play again in the college football or in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, and it would be very, very ironic, and I'm sure ACC fans would secretly be quite upset about it if Notre Dame gets in the ACC, what they didn't even really want to be in because of a pandemic, and they win the freaking conference. That would be. But you mentioned the schedule. To be fair, really, if they weren't. Yes, the schedule strength would be tougher and would benefit them if they would win out. But if they played their normal schedule with all those giants out of conference, they'd lose a couple games. They wouldn't run this table. So they would probably lose a game or two. So they have a better chance of going undefeated now. But the schedule is certainly easier that if they do lose a game, the committee's going to say, well, you didn't beat anybody then. So the Clemson's the only team that's ranked really that they can.
Yeah, Clemson's not dead yet. They just 53-yard touchdown. So 10-7, that game's going to be a heck of a game. So there's a long way to go in that, but Notre Dame needs to win this game to keep their bowl or to keep their title hopes alive. But should be interesting, and I'm gonna go watch it right now.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap things up here, we were talking a couple weeks ago. North Carolina was ranked 15th. So unless Mac Brown got something he wants to pull out of a hat to really put a monkey wrench into things, this game definitely is the factor. Well, Mike, definitely appreciate the time. Criticism or not, I think we're covering everything as fair as we can be and just analyzing what's in front of us. And I will say, anyone out there, whether you're a fan of this team or not, if you want a lit broadcast or some lit coverage coming up, head over to Nittany Sports now because, wow, I'd imagine Corey and company got a lot to talk about what's going on with them, especially today with the Maryland game. But nonetheless, for all of us through the now family of networks, no matter which team is being covered, and that also will include tomorrow at Steelers Now, a team that I guess no one's really going to be too mad at right now, being undefeated still. Yeah. And a pretty easy game coming up based on things. For Mike Vukovcan, for Pittsburgh Sports Now, for Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm Mike Asti. Pitt gets back on the winning track. They break the losing streak. They break the embarrassment that was the past. They stop the bleeding and they get back with a big victory. So as Mike said, we're now all going to watch Notre Dame Clemson, as that pretty much will set the rest of the ACC season, at least, if not all of college football in course the rest of the way.